I never had trouble meeting new people, making friends, getting into relationships, but I always struggled to maintain them. Eventually, the communication would break down, people would leave, and I would be alone. And it took a long time to admit it, but it was my fault, or at least mostly my fault. The people in my life didn't feel like I was invested in them. Now, that wasn't true, but it doesn't matter. It's not enough to care about somebody. It's not enough to understand them. They have to feel understood. They have to feel cared about. And I wasn't doing that. And then I took this technique I had honed on stage, and I started using it outside of magic, and I realized I could make better, more meaningful connections with people. I met friends, incredible friends that have lasted years. I met a beautiful, fiercely intelligent woman, the love of my life, and I held on to that relationship. We're actually engaged to be married. Oh, thank you. She'll be happy to hear that. None of that would have been possible before. So of course the question then becomes how? How do you do it? How do you do perspective taking? Well, first you need to understand the difference between visual perspective and emotional perspective. Magicians traditionally deal with visual perspective. We need to know literally what the trick looks like to the audience. So we practice in front of mirrors, we film ourselves and watch it back, but relationships are primarily about emotional perspective. How is somebody feeling about our interaction? It seems like a difficult thing to do, to get to know someone's emotional perspective, but let's get back to Ed and his wife. The relevant question for Ed was, what would magic feel like to someone who is blind? I didn't want Ed to feel tricked. That was important to me. I don't know, but I have to imagine if you're blind, you could be tricked by anybody at any time. So I didn't want Ed to feel tricked. I wanted him to feel magic. I wanted him to be magical. And his wife, this woman who spends her life looking out for him, I wanted her to see him in that light and for them to share in that experience together. So if you want to get to know someone's emotional perspective, one of the simplest ways to do it, ask. Ask questions. Too often we're afraid to ask people questions because we feel like it will be rude or somehow they won't want to answer, but we underestimate people's willingness to answer our questions. Before the trick I asked Ed, have you always been blind? He said yes. To me that was crucial, relevant information. It seems that a person who has never been able to see will have a different perspective from somebody who had their sight and then lost it to accident or to illness. With Ed, I can't even use the language of sight. So by asking questions, I can adjust my tone, my demeanor, even my language, so that he feels understood and we can make a connection. Now, if you're going to learn this, it's important not simply to ask questions, but to listen to the answers and listen to understand. Don't just listen to respond or to reply. You've heard it before. This is where I went wrong most in my life, I think. You've heard it before, and we're all guilty of it from time to time, but too often we listen to people only with the intention of coming up with something clever to say. So as soon as their lips stop moving, we can jump in and say our thing. We've all done it, we're all guilty of it, but I did this especially badly, and I think to the detriment of my relationships. Have you ever asked for somebody's name and instantly forgotten what it was? You know why we forget people's names? Because while they're telling us their name, we're thinking about how we're going to say ours. First name, last name, Mr. Miller, Brian, put out your hand. We're not listening. We're on our end of the conversation only. So you can start to learn this technique. Ask questions, listen to understand the answers. When you do that, I think you'll find you can make better, more meaningful connections with people, personally and professionally. It drastically improved my life, and I really believe it will improve yours. So, Ed. How did Ed, a blind man, see the cards? The answer, as in most great magic, was actually very simple. I sat across from him, and underneath the table, I placed my foot gently on top of his. And then I gave him these instructions. I said, if you think the card is a red card, and I pushed my foot down on his once, then you say red. If you think it's a black card, and I pushed my foot down on his twice, then you say black. I was teaching Ed a secret system of communication where I would let him know what color the card was by the foot taps. Once for red, twice for black. And I repeated the instructions. If you think it's a red card, say red. If you think it's a black card, say black. And then I squeezed his hand gently and I asked, do you understand? And he smiled and he said, yes, I understand. And I knew then that we had connected. When it was all said and done, I taught his wife how we did it, like I just taught you, so they could go do it for their friends and family. And Ed was so excited, he couldn't wait to see his grandkids that weekend so he could, quote, freak them out completely. See, magic isn't about the technical skill. Magic isn't about a trick or even the secret. Magic is about connecting. Life is about connecting. And connecting is about taking on other points of view. You see, our world is a shared experience, fractured by individual perspectives. Imagine if we could all feel understood.